okay, I did this and I know it got better. And then I did it again and I know it got better. So part of it, Billy, is it's one thing for me to see their improvement. It's a better thing for them to do the work and feel better and more confident, even if it's, just a little bit.
I'm Billy Ryan, and this is the No One Is Watching podcast, where we explore high-performing teams, individuals, and leaders, and dig deep to find out what makes them tick. This show highlights the DNA shared by elite performers, the process by which they leverage that talent, and ultimately helps you apply those lessons to your own life, business, or team. All right, Katy. Well, it's been a couple of years, but it's good to see you again.
Great to see you again. We're coast to coast. We're bi-coastal again.
So I'm excited to have this conversation because I think that for a variety of reasons, but I think I view what you do in your area of expertise as sort of an undervalued, leveraged area, because a lot of leadership in my minds it comes back to communication. It comes back to connecting with people, and doing that in person is one thing. Doing that the way you and I are doing it right now, right, through a computer or through a TV camera, whatever it may be, is very different. So really eager to pick your brain on this.
I'm right here. I'm ready to go.
All right. So before we get to that, you had a long and successful career in journalism and broadcast. Spent a lot of time in front of the camera. So you just kind of walk me through a little bit, like what got you into that field, what drew you to it, and sort of your journey on that front.
Yeah, I think, yes. And we knew, so our connection, of course, for the audience is with the Atlanta Braves, right? When you were working with the Atlanta Braves and I was covering the Atlanta Braves and then did some consulting for them. But I was the little girl that my mom said that threw the dolls over the fence when I got them for a birthday gift. And she said, all I wanted to do was play sports. And I grew up in a small town, big Irish Catholic family. And that's what we did. And that's what I loved. And in high school, I had the opportunity. I grew up in a small town, Merced, California. A lot of good athletes come out of there, by the way. And we had a local TV show, and I was able to do this local TV show in high school, and I got to be the sports caster. And there was a woman that did a lot of business, and then the gentleman did a lot of econ and stuff he covered the rest of the city. And I just got lucky in this role. And so I was fumbling through it, as you can imagine, Billy, just messy. I'm in high school. I don't even know what's happening. And I'm just interviewing these athletes, these high school athletes. And that was a big change for me. And then when I graduated, I thought, this is it. You have to see it to be it. So I wasn't going to play professionally because there wasn't a thing when I was younger. I always wanted to be an Olympic athlete, but that took a lot of work. So right. I was like, I don't think so. But I always said if I was taller, I would have been an Olympic volleyball player. That's what I wanted. Anyway, all that to say was then I got the focus, the shields on, and I ended up fast track, first job on camera in Fresno covering Jerry Tarkanian. So that sets us back a little bit. He came and was the Fresno State men's basketball coach. So I did a coach's show with him, which was interesting.
That was post UNLV, right?
It was post UNLV, and then he did that little stint with the Spurs. And what was interesting for sports fans about that time is that, as you know, Tarkanian was the master of the junior college transfers before people thought that was an okay thing to do. And so
he was ahead of his time. Yeah,
he was ahead of his time, and they all tried. The NCAA just chased him the whole way before he passed away and never got him.
Mm-hmm.
So that was interesting because there was a big Armenian culture. There's a big Armenian population in Fresno, and they all wanted him there. He and his wife had gone to school there. And the president was like, was a little concerned about having Tarkanian for obvious reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And the city won, and they built the Pepsi Center because of his presence. And when I was there, he had a Chris Herron. I don't know if you remember him. Chris Herron and Rafer Alston. They were the backcourt, Skip to my Lou. Yeah. And he had a bunch of amazing transfers. And they were having a hard time kind of gelling. So I would say that I wasn't with him in the glory days. And so let's just say between commercials and there was a lot of silence. But I loved him, and I knew that I was lucky to be able to be around that type of greatness. He was a gym rat. and he just loved basketball. And
So
then
that was your first
that
that
was
was your first full-time gig.
my first full time getting paid for being on TV was
Wow.
Fresno doing the
Okay.
coach a show and then Pat Hill, the football coach, and then I did some other stuff. The Giants, you may remember, the Giants AAA team got there then, so I
Yeah.
covered them. And Russ Ortiz was on that team. Armando Rios was on that team. It was
Name
crazy.
dropping.
I know, right? I'm name dropping. And then I ended up covering them in the bigs. So
Yeah.
that was my first opportunity, and I was hooked, of course.
That's amazing. That's actually pretty cool. I mean, you've got a guy who's got a big reputation and a big personality, and he's doing it. And you're not, like, to your point, you're not there for the glory days, right? So that's, I don't know him that, I'm not that familiar, but I imagine he was not super happy when they're not winning, right? So that's a tough spot for a young kid to be in, like
And
the
I was
awkward
young, and that's how
off-camera
I felt.
silence. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think that was you learn when that happens, and this is where maybe the presentation and the executive presence and the interpersonal communication skills come from. Where I'm young, and this guy doesn't care about me. He was respectful, but this is my journey at this point, is trying to
Yeah.
manage how I can get through that. So what I did was they were so bad for a while that I created a certain section in the show that was kind of a historical one. So then the third segment of the show was always kind of talking about the glory days. And that softened him a little bit
Smart.
because he was such a loyal guy that
Yeah.
anytime he could talk about his old guys, he was happy, and the memories. And he was sweet. He was a sweet man that was basketball obsessed.
Sure.
X's and O's, baby. That's all he cared about. And
Right.
so that was a great experience for me to kind of try to get through. And it was a live studio audience. So I was also the one that was having to engage with the audience during the breaks. And it was
Did that kind of thing come natural to you? Did you I mean, you said you loved sports from a kid, but were you always comfortable talking to people in front of groups, in front of crowds?
That's a great question. I think yes, and I got better. I think that I'm an extrovert, and I was raised in the way, it all does go back to how you were raised, but I was raised in a household where you answered the door when company came, you stayed up until they left, and you offered them drinks and something to eat, and you engaged them in conversation, and then you walked them to the door whenever they were leaving. That's how it goes. So I had those skills, and it's really about making everybody else comfortable. So then when you're in sports for so long, and or news really, but if you're in a situation where you're trying to warm up the room when your videographer's getting the set ready, or you're trying to warm up the room when you're going into someone's home to do a story on their kid, those skills are repetitive and they continue to build them. But when you're hosting something, it's not Tark's job to warm up the audience. It's mine. And ideally, it's Tark that does it, because that's who they want to hear from.
Right.
So they don't want to hear from me. I'm whatever. I'm 26 years old, and this guy is a legend.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting, because I think that is you just meet people that are super comfortable engaging, right? In any social situation. And it's an incredible gift. And I don't think it's given enough credit. And a lot of times, it's like, oh, he's a sales guy. Look at him. He's a sales guy. And it's almost like has like this negative connotation, but in reality, it's like that skill set, you could probably pluck him out of whatever environment he's in or whatever organization he's with and put him on the other side of the country doing something else. And he'd probably be just as successful because of that skill set. And you can't say that about a lot of people,
It's a good point. And Billy, and I know you're in leadership development, and it's the same thing. It's that, you're in a room, or you're in a virtual room, whatever it is, the leader is warming up the room and making other people feel comfortable and seen and heard, period.
Right. Yeah. And you see it now. It's going to be, I hope I'm wrong, but it seems like it's going to be more and more rare as everything's virtual, everything's digital. There's all this entertainment at our fingertips, and kids just aren't forced to do what you were when you were a kid, right? And engage, okay, go play your Nintendo, go do whatever. And they're not developing those skill sets. Some people will still just be blessed with it and be able to navigate, but others are never going to sort of be forced to. And the folks that do have it, I think, are going to jump off the page. And I want to get into a little bit of this on sort of the virtual versus the in-person stuff, but I think it'll jump off the page in both settings.
Yeah, and I think you notice that when it's funny how you get older and you get wiser. Nobody wants to get old, and yet you do get wiser. And then you see the generations under you, and you see that the different skill sets that they have versus, and no one's worse or no one's better, but you do see that. And I do think COVID ruined a lot of things about that. Of all generations, I think there were a few generations that got hit the hardest, of course, but we became more isolated, and then things became okay. Then you're working from home and things become okay. So then those kind of things aren't seen as valuable anymore. And so to your point,
Yeah.
when you have them, you will jump off the page.
Yeah, I was talking to I had an engagement recently with a company, and we're talking about sort of that dynamic, right? The in-person versus remote, to oversimplify, in-person versus remote work. And I was talking about a client, and I said, look, the client their client, not mine, the client may be a little bit lazy, right? And they may not want to go into the office either. And it's become such a like a trigger point for people, like this personal, because people think remote work and it's like their lifestyle, their day to day. And it's like, no, that's not what I'm getting at. I don't mean lazy in a derogatory term. I just mean, hey, I can do it from my living room. I'm not going to go into the office. You'll probably be more efficient, right, in your living room. But what you cannot replicate is that interaction, that energy, that sort of learning through osmosis, that real time stuff that happens that there's no possible way to do. We cannot replicate that on a Zoom call or anything else. And so it's a ebb and flow, right, with anything. But yeah, I agree. There are I think we lost something. And I'm not sure we're ever going to really get it back. We lost some good things. I mean, we lost some bad things too. We don't need to bring them back, but there were some really good things that I think got sort of replaced in our brains with respect to sort of the workforce that I think we'll continue to see sort of a trickle down effect.
Yep. Genie's out of the bottle now. So there's no, people say that they save time with the water cooler talk, as they say.
Yeah.
And you don't have those conversations, and you're saving time with commuting. Yes. And you don't have, like you said, those off the cuff effective businesses, time going out to lunch, the in-person stuff. The other thing too is that it's easier for us to be more present in person. It just is.
Sure.
So
sure. Yeah, I mean, it's like you and I go grab lunch. The conversation is probably going to go in 10 different directions. If we're sitting here on a pre-scheduled 30-minute meeting, we're going to stick to an agenda, and it's going to be, sort of by the book. So, there's a lot of different directions you can take that. But getting back to your media career, what happened after Fresno for you? You were hooked. It sounds like you were really fortunate to get a good opportunity for that first sort of full-time gig. Where did it go from there?
Yeah, so I was hooked, and then I ended up having a little disagreement with my boss, and so I left. I had recommended some changes, and he said, if you don't like the way that we're progressing here, you should probably leave. And so I left. It's always interesting to think about that, because who knows what would have happened. So I left and went up to San Francisco just for a year and was hustling. I was doing some reporting and some editing, and then I was working doing signs for the Oakland A's. I was doing makeup for Estee Lauder. I was just hustling to figure out what I was going to do next, and because I still had the bug. And long story short, I got a job as a weekend sports anchor in San Diego. That was a big one. So I came down. They had launched a Fox affiliate in 1999, and my news director said, "Hey, you're really green, but I think you have something. And so here's what we're going to do. We're going to hire you for a year. And if it doesn't work out, then you have a year worth of resume reel. And if it does, it's a win-win." So it's not like I was getting beaming, reports. That being said, I went down there, and that changed the trajectory. So I was doing weekend sports. We had an hour-long Sunday sports show called That Sunday Sports Show. And this is when Marty Schottenheimer was coaching. I had Ryan Leaf my first year in the NFL, 1999. So Ryan Leaf, here I am the first year in the NFL, and I'm covering Ryan Leaf. And then the Padres. So I was, I covered Trevor Hoffman and Tony Gwynn and the greats.
Yeah.
And so I was there for about 5 years. And that's where I really got really good, because I was able to communicate on a teleprompter, which took a while, be a good reporter, be a good listener. That's the key. And so I was able to host and report and do everything there. And then we got lucky because the Super Bowl was there. And then the PGA Tour came to town at that time twice a year. So that was a good chunk of my life. And then after that, I ended up going to Atlanta.
Yeah. So where'd you win your Emmy? I'm not going to let you get off the hook
I
that
won
quick.
my Emmy in San
Emmy-award
Diego,
winner
and it
in
was,
San
and by
Diego.
the way, any good reporter will say that they cannot win their Emmy without a videographer. And I had a
Sure.
brilliant videographer named Aaron Crummell, and we did a story on one of the East County teams going to the Little League World Series.
Love it. I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. So those are always nice stories. You know, I loved covering the Chargers and the Padres and stuff. And then the women's WSA, which is the women's professional soccer league, before it's folded since, but this
Yeah.
is when this was the one that came out. Like Julie Foudy was on the team that I covered here. And
Oh, okay.
and Mia Hamm was playing in the league, and then Abby Wambach came up. So Shannon McMillan. So I got lucky during that time frame. And but it was nice to always cover the little league stuff, right? That's where all the pure joy is.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's always a fun time of year to see that. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's just refreshing, you know, especially when you're surrounded it. You're dealing with pros all day, every day. You can kind of get a little jaded.
Yes.
Let's see kids. It's fun.
It is. You're right. I mean, that's the difference. I go from covering the Padres and then the joy of the kids crying or jumping up and down or whatever it is.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing there is, like, you know, we would have conversations with, you know, guys that are in the big leagues for 5 years and they're battling some mental stuff or some, whatever it may be. Just remember what it felt like when you were 11 years old, you know, just go out and have fun, you know, it really is freeing because it's like in its purest form, you know. Now we're veering away from that in youth sports, in my opinion, but I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to go there yet. So you wind up back in Atlanta, you said, from San Diego.
Yeah, I had a boss say, you know, I think you're ready for the main job, but we're not going to put a woman in that spot. And I had stayed in touch. I had been in Atlanta earlier, behind the scenes stuff, and I had stayed in touch. At the time, it was Fox Sports South. At that time, I think now at this point, it's FanDuel's, and then it's been Bally's. But at the time, it was Fox Sports South, and it was their biggest regional sports network. And at the time, a gentleman named Steve Craddock was their executive producer. And of course, they had the rights for the Braves. And so I went out there, and things kind of changed right when I got there. The big Fox went in a lot of different directions. And all of a sudden, I find that I leave San Diego and I'm going to their biggest regional sports network, 14 million homes, and they didn't really know what to do with me. And so I just walked into the boss's office and said, why don't you put me on the Braves beat? What else are you going to do? It was kind of awkward. And so he did. So then I was the on-field reporter for 3 seasons. So 2006, 2007, 2008, and then did NFL Network stuff in the off season. But that is something, that beat reporting for baseball. Wow.
Yeah. That's there's a lot going on there.
There's
so
a lot.
You've got the hustle gene, right? You've talked about it already multiple times. You got to figure it out sometimes. And it rarely, I feel like anything in sports, right? But even on the media side of that, it's rarely is it a straight line. You know, there's all these like little gaps that you've got to figure it out somehow. Hey, put me on the beat for 162.
For 162.
Yeah.
Without knowing, obviously, what I was requesting. But I mean, what do you do?
So I want to get into your like the pivot to coaching, because obviously you're incredibly talented and qualified to sort of help folks in this space. And it's hard to, I would imagine, there's not a lot of people that can say that, right? That have spent that much time in front of a camera in sort of like the diverse settings that you have with the diverse audiences. So tell me a little bit about like what was the light bulb moment for you where you're like, this is where I want to go with coaching.
I had worked for a woman, when in all of the hustling jobs, like you mentioned, I had worked for a woman named Andrea Kirby, who was kind of probably our parents' age, and she was a sportscaster for a while. And at the time, I was kind of her administrative assistant. This is when I was living in San Francisco and doing all these jobs. And I learned so much from her. And I just remember thinking that, but you don't know, I just kind of thought, if I am ever done as a broadcaster, I want to be a media trainer for athletes, because that's what she did. And so when I thought about it, I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll try to do this, because I did have a weird, random 6-year space where I was in technology, which is crazy when I think about it. And it taught me a lot. It taught
I'm
me a
sure.
lot
Yeah.
about, it actually brought me back to San Diego. It taught me about business, which is helpful for you and I who are running our own. And it taught me a lot about what's going on in technology. It was Qualcomm. And so that was crazy, but it happened. And then when I decided to go out on my own, my thought was, I'm going to be a media coach for athletes and teams, just like Andrea was. And so you don't know what you don't know. So I started calling just some of my old connections, because I had been out of it for a while. And I talked to a couple agents, and I went in and talked to John Boggs, who some of your
Sure.
visitors will know. And he was great, because someone had referred me to him. And you know how agents can be. And he was not that. He was present and kind. And he said, listen, that I'm talking to you as a favor to somebody, and the timing might be perfect. Tony Gwynn Jr. is retiring and wants to be a Padres broadcaster. And my first instinct was, well, that's me for sure. It wasn't even a question. And I almost, to the point where I didn't even recognize myself, because sometimes, for years, there was a lot of kind of, trying to bring me down. And so I literally just said, that's for me. I can help him for sure. And he said, well, let me have you talk to him. And so I did talk to T, and I had covered his dad as a player. I had covered his dad as a coach at San Diego State.
Yeah.
And we had a great conversation. And so I coached him for 3 months to get him ready. At the time, he was with the Dodgers, and he was my first client. And then you go back to, okay, I'm hooked. And then what I did is I started networking in San Diego and meeting people like vice presidents and CEOs and COOs and business leaders. And I had never really been exposed to that, because sports is like this, it's focused. And then when I was in technology, I was with engineers all the time. And to listen to these leaders want to be great at things, and masterminds and reading books and personal and professional development, all these things. And I was way behind the curve, but I saw that and I thought, oh, I'm going to expand my business. And then COVID hit, and my sweet spot is how you can come across as confident and authentic on camera. And so that's kind of what happened. That's how it blossomed. So then once COVID hit, I was coaching all over, because it's the camera that freaks people out.
Right.
So then now I have athletes, and I've had athletes, some of them you and I know, and I've had
Hmm.
managers and stuff like that. And most of my clients are executives.
I had a similar epiphany when I got out of baseball, where again, you're here for so
Yeah.
long, and
Yeah.
you don't know what you don't know, and you're
Yeah.
immersed in this world, and it takes all kinds, but largely you are surrounded by passionate, driven people who are there because they love being a part of that, in some way,
Hmm.
shape, or form. And then you
Hmm.
get out of that environment and you realize the rest of the world's not like that.
Yes.
And there are still, certainly there are organizations that are, and there are people that are, but there's a lot of people that just the motivations are different,
Yeah.
the skill sets are different.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, I had this kind of it's made me exponentially better as a leader, because I had to figure out how to resonate messages with people, that like the old playbook wasn't working. Like I just used to work in baseball, it does not work anymore. And so um, it was really eye opening to me that there's all of these lessons that you can pull from sports, and there's a whole bunch of reasons why you hear analogies and speeches and keynotes about sports and military, right? Because it's very relatable and linear. But there's a whole big broad world out there that could benefit from this information, right? These anecdotes, this skill set.
Hmm.
And whether it comes from the sports world or not is sort of irrelevant, right? But to your point, you've got to got to connect with somebody in an authentic way to make it work. Whether you're
Mm-hmm.
a big league manager or you're a chief operating officer or, whatever role you're in, you've got to be able to connect with people. And this
Well,
part of it, go ahead.
no, what was your, and I don't coach interrupting like I just did, but what was your, was there one episode where you could tell that people are different in the real world than they are in sports?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah. Yeah, it was, and I wasn't arrogant enough to think I had it all figured out, but I was super passionate about certain things, and I
Yeah.
was coming from a place where a lot of the people were similarly passionate about similar things. And I'm just going off on a rant, and I'm getting excited, and
Yeah.
I'm looking around, and it's just there's nothing behind the eyes, and I'm like, oh, this is not working at all. Like, this is not, it's like I'm speaking a foreign language. And I like I, I finished, and I was like, man, that was a disaster. Like, maybe I'm not cut out for this. It's something where I was pretty confident in sort of the general athleticism to go be able to get into a different industry and figure it out, and use what I knew to kind of buy me some time to figure out what I didn't know. And I started questioning that a little bit, because I'm like, man, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this only works in sports. And all it was just a slight reframe, of
Yeah.
trying to figure out. And this is where I just related it back to players. You're sitting in a clubhouse and you're talking to a kid who's $5 million first round pick out of Vanderbilt. And then you're talking to a kid that got $8,000 out of the Dominican and slept on a dirt floor, and they're both big leaguers now,
Yeah.
right? Or they're both minor leaguers now, or whatever the situation is. And how do you get those kids, sort of rowing in the same direction, and to understand how to own their career and what sort of steps they're going to have to take to get there. And, that's like leading and managing 101, and the really good managers, the Bobby Coxes of the world. They just do that. Right. And you don't even know they're doing it, but they just weave in between different groups and peoples and backgrounds and ages and all of it. And like, they're just swimming in it. And it's almost like a dance. So it was clumsy for me at first, because I was kind of used to one area.
Yeah.
But once I kind of had that moment, I'm like, okay, I get it. Like, now I can. And really, I think for me, it came from a place of empathy, I suppose, understanding where they're coming from. Like, what I'm motivated by this, but I can tell very quickly that you are not. So I got to figure out what motivates you, and what is going to drive you to perform at a high level.
Yeah, I mean, and I love the way that you used that you had the general athleticism. You felt comfortable with your general athleticism, which I think is a great phrase that I'm going to steal, if you're okay with that.
It's all
But that
yours.
you know enough, right? And that you were able to pivot. And that goes back to kind of your mantra, which is, we see life through different, artists see life through art. Poets see life through poet. Athlete, you and I see life through sports. And so what you were able to do is adapt, just like you have to do, think on your feet and adapt, just like you've had to do in sports for so long. And it worked. So it's
Yeah.
it's still authentic to who you are. You just were smart enough to know that if it's about the audience, if you know it's about the audience and it's about what they need, then you're golden.
Right. And the last half of my career in baseball, I was very fortunate that I just got to kind of be on a fly on the wall for some really interesting conversation and sit in with some really interesting people. And they weren't all in sports, and at the end of the day, you get in an environment where you've just got these elite performers. Some of them are musicians, artists, actors,
Yeah.
military, all walks of life. And you just you see them start talking shop, and it could be with, a musician and an athlete, and they're not quite connecting. And then they find that common thread,
Mm-hmm.
and somebody just says something a certain way, and they get it. They're like, oh yeah, right. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's the process by which they do, like, how they sharpen themselves, where they get better, where they're inspired, all these things. It's like really valuable stuff. That, yeah, I view it through sports a lot of times, but it doesn't. It's really a universal,
Yes.
pillar to high performance, right?
Yeah.
Irrespective of what field it's in.
Right.
People, and that's what this podcast has been super fun for me to do, because you start it every time you talk to somebody, right? that shines through. It doesn't matter. It's a brain surgeon or it's a pro athlete. It's like you guys have gotten to where you are through much more similar paths than you realize.
Right. And I mean, and you also said empathy, which is big. And it's, sometimes people don't see that a lot in sports, but I would also argue that in the corporate world, there might not be a lot of it either. Right. And so that's our most important communication skill, is listening. And it's a skill, which means you can get better at it. And you said the word empathy, and that's one of the best ways for people out there that want to become better listeners. That's one of the ways to do it, is to stop and be empathetic. And you use that word, and that will serve everybody. That'll serve anybody that practices it.
Well, I tell you what was a humbling and an eye-opening sort of moment for me was I got out of baseball and got into this industry where I was sort of dancing between a few different worlds. One was finance and one was sort of blue collar trade workers in construction. And you're dealing with folks that, and I grew up, in a community and I think at a time where we were sort of, where the focus was from an educational perspective across the country was, quite honestly, kind of looked down on the trade workers, the blue collar professions, right? And it was all about higher education and this and this. And hey, that's why you go to college, kids. And you look up now and we just have this massive need for skilled labor. And I can't build a house with my bare hands, but that guy over there can, right? And so part of the business I was in was we needed to connect all these experts, one of which being, the construction expert. And, that person largely has been treated a certain way within this ecosystem, probably for his whole life, his whole career. So he's got the scar tissue built up and he's got these defense mechanisms. And you realize that I can't do what I need to do. And my business and organization can't run without this guy's buy-in, right? And there's 500 of them all over the country that we need to get buy-in from them, right? And how do we do that? And so that really made me better as a leader from an empathy perspective, because it's like, I don't know what he doesn't really have time to zoom out and think about what's my succession plan, or I need to hire somebody to kind of help me steer this ship, or is my technology keeping up with the needs of my bit? It's sort of gig to gig, right? I just finished this house, I just got a new contract, I got to get going on this new one, I don't have time to come up for air. And you do that, and it's the world you live in at that point. So then you look up 20 years later and all you've done is you've built all these wonderful things, and your business has just sort of happened while you were doing it, right? And instead of up in the ivory tower sort of orchestrating everything strategically and just letting somebody else go execute. So that made me better as a leader, made me better as a listener, because talking to people that know things that you don't, that's a great way to be humbled.
You never want to be the smartest person in the room.
Yeah, I never have that problem, so I'm in a good spot.
I mean, good. I don't either. And I think as long as we're continuing to do that, that's true leadership too.
Hey, real quick, if you're getting value from the show, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button, and if you're so inclined, go ahead and leave a 5-star review while you're at it. It helps more people like you find this podcast, and honestly, that simple form of support, it makes a difference. All right, back to the conversation. Yeah, I would agree. So, this is really, your angle on this is really interesting to me, because I think that, again, it's sort of similar to the analogy I just made with the construction expert. You work on building a house. Most people don't get into their career thinking I'm going to be a great leader, or really I'm going to maybe they want to be a CEO, or maybe they want to be an entrepreneur, run their own business, but it's not that they want to probably lead a team or, really just be this dynamic leader. I think it's more they focus on what they want to do, what they want to build, what kind of lifestyle they want to live. There's all these factors that come into it. And then you develop those skills either organically or inorganically over time, or you don't develop those skills and you hit some roadblocks. But the thing that doesn't get enough credit in my mind is that communication, and communication has a lot of different layers in my mind. There's the one-on-one sort of more intimate, hey, let's go have a cup of coffee, or let's go grab dinner. We're at some conference together, right? It's more of a collegial communication. But then there's the behind the screen, There's the in front of 500 people. There's all these different sort of venues that you have to be able to do it. And I've seen people that have been excellent, like really, really good one-on-one or small groups, 3, 4, 5 people. And then it gets to like 10 and you're just like, it's like a different human being. You're like, and I would have the flop sweat and the pain because I'm like, what are you doing? Like, just be yourself. Right. But it just, the switch flipped and it was different. It was a totally different person at that point. So you've seen a million of examples of this. Tell me about just the difference in demographics and audience in platforms that you've seen either personally or sort of through your clients and what that means to folks.
Well, what's interesting is that everybody has their own stuff, and by that I mean, if my clients are they're high level and they're growth minded, and again, they're vice presidents and above, and so they're not afraid of hard work. They know that they want to get better, and they've already had opportunities to speak. And life is different now because everybody's being asked to be on a podcast, a panel. They're running meetings, and then there's the legit media training or doing a presentation, pitching to investors, speaking at conferences, being a panelist at a conference, a moderator. Whatever that is, there's a variety of things that I see. And what is interesting to me is that everybody has their own stuff. And when I say that, I say that there are executive directors who are fine when they're presenting in a room. And when they go on camera, they're a different person. It freaks them out for a variety of reasons. And we can talk about why the camera is so weird for people. So there's people that are good in person and don't like being on camera. There's other people who are fine on camera. They just don't like talking to large groups. There are other people that I've had in my group sessions called the impactful speaker, where they are fine. They say they're fine at work and they're fine when they're presenting, but now they're with their peers and they're nervous in front of their peers. I've done workshops with corporations where people will say, I'm fine giving a presentation. I'm okay speaking, but practicing in front of the people that I work with is making me uncomfortable. So it's incredible how varietal, if that's a word, how varietal that is, where I'm good here, but not here. And then the idea is, let's figure out why. And if we can't get there, so there's two things there, right, Billy, which I know you understand. I have had to say to a few people, just so you know, I am not a therapist. And I say that with love. Like, the reality is that there is a saying that people would rather die than public speak. I mean,
Yeah.
It's legit. Okay, so here we are. So we know that it brings out the kind of nerves and the insecurities in people, which I experienced in television and broadcasting for a long time, where I was judged all the time from the outside. And, there were some vicious things said. So it's really about finding out what the specific goal is for that person and get through what's bothering them. So let's talk about the camera. It can affect you in two ways. It can affect you tactically or technically and emotionally. And when I say tactically or technically, there are people who will say to me, the camera doesn't make me nervous and I'm fine on it. I just don't feel like, I don't like the way I look. I don't feel like I sound like myself, and I don't know what to do about it. Okay, so that's tactical. The emotional part is, I just freak out. It makes me uncomfortable. I judge myself, all of the emotional things. I don't like the way I look. Emotional, emotional, emotional. So then once we get that, then we can tackle it. There are different ways that we go about it, because the reality is, and this is what I tell everybody, it's not fair that we're all on Zoom anymore. For me, I'm okay with it, right, Billy? Because I set out to do this as a career.
Right.
But for other people, it's that this isn't what they wanted. So now,
Yeah.
especially in COVID, they had to get used to this camera. Okay, not fair, not cool. I'm sorry. And here we are. And if you're an executive and you want to show up, then you need to make sure that that camera sees the best version of yourself. And then we go from there. In other words, people can be sitting like this and they feel like they're sitting up straight. And my clients tease me, shoulders back, Katy, shoulders back. And the other thing is, I was thinking about your podcast this morning. No one is watching when no one is watching. The other thing about when you're on Zoom or Teams or Meets or whatever anybody uses, you have to remember that you are always on. Because if you're in a Zoom and you've got your boss watching you in the gallery vision, or when you're talking and you've got like this kind of face, or you're looking around, or your shoulders are slumped, or like you're checking your phone, people notice that. And people think that they're being sneaky by doing that. And some people it's conscious and some people it's not. But I like to remind my clients, you always are on. And it's really easy to kind of get lazy or forget when you're virtual.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a great point. You sit around, if you're in a conference room or you're at a presentation, maybe there's 50 people in the audience and you're one of them. You can get away with slouching or, checking your phone or whatever. But man, I've worked with and for some people that the body language is just atrocious.
Mm-hmm.
And you get on the meeting and you are 30 seconds in, you're like, this is going nowhere. Like I can already tell he's in a bad mood because he's sitting sideways and he's, flipping a pen or whatever. And I'm like, and you got 50 people that are sitting there.
He's like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's
It's
like
just in,
he's like this. He's
uh-huh.
you
Yeah.
know,
And so it's all this thought where maybe it comes off. I mean, does it come across worse in camera than it may in person? Like, is it more noticeable because everybody's framed up the same? And I don't know. But I've definitely noticed the impact of the body language and sort of how you show up on camera.
well, the thing is about the virtual part is that you want to make sure that you are coming across as close to in person as possible. And, when you're in person, you want your shoulders back, you want to make eye contact. And so when you're talking about virtual, you think of the three things. Number one, you want light on your face so that they can see you, touch you, feel you. I know that sounds weird, but we are building relationships here. So the first thing is you want light on your face, which you have. And I tell my clients, especially if you're in a hotel room and you've got to get on an important Zoom, maybe you have your home studio set up, but anywhere else, maybe you're visiting your in-laws for the holidays and you need to get on a job interview. I tell them, first of all, find the natural light in the room because you want to light your face with the natural light. If that doesn't work because of the way the room's set up, so as you've seen, some people will be in a hotel room and the natural light's here and then the bed's in the back. And I'm like, I would rather not have the bed in the back. Okay. So the other thing is if there's no natural light, then you get a ring light or something here, which I have. And I've got a little one that I bought that I can, that just click on the computer. So it's got a little bag, you can pack it, $20. So you've got the natural light on your face. Okay. So now they see you. The second thing is you want to be in the middle of the screen as if you are in person, not like this. You know how people, not like this,
Yeah.
you want it. And then the third thing is clear background, right? You don't want people to be so obsessed with all the books and they're wondering,
Yeah.
I wonder what he's reading. So now they're not paying attention because
Yeah.
our attention spans used to be around 2 minutes and now they're less than a goldfish, which is true. And so as a presenter or a speaker or a leader, we need to break through the noise. And we need to do these little things that will help us break through the noise. And having a clear and professional studio is going to do that.
Well, don't watch the Alan Trammell episode of this
Okay.
podcast. Tram is the
Oh,
best.
shoot. I'd like to hear what. Okay.
he's, he's the absolute best. And he was one of the first guys I had on. And he was at home and it was like backlit. And he's like, I'm trying to figure out, Billy, I'm like, Tram, you're good. Let's just talk,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know that
Okay.
people there's people that get a break. Come on.
Yeah, 100%. And Tram definitely does.
I can have a perfect background, but there's a lot of people that would rather hear what Alan Trammell has to say.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Me as well. So you also work with a lot of, in addition to sort of the how-to, right? You've got a lot of high performers. You deal with a lot of athletes, and obviously you're doing a lot of executives now too.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a tough transition. It's for a lot of folks, right? Transitioning from sports, it's your sole identity for, if you're fortunate for 30 some odd years, right? And now you're going to do something else. And obviously some athletes are naturally sort of charismatic and talented and can do that with minimal training. Others, I imagine it's hard and they could be really good at it, but there's a lot more, lifting to do to get them there. I mean, what's that specific sort of transition point that you've witnessed with people, whether it's sports or not, but getting it like, all right, I need to get better here, kind of reinvent myself. Like, how do I go about doing that?
That's a great question. And it is a challenge, especially when you get somebody that is so successful and then you find this thing, like I see this thing and I think, oh my God, I could just make them, if they would listen to me, they would be so much better and more clear and credible when they're speaking. And it kind of goes back to the Alan Trammell thing, right? Where nobody success, because I get a lot of people in biotech and life sciences or even sports where all this success here, but then there's a skill set called communications that, to nobody's fault, nobody has taught them
Mm-hmm.
these things to get better. And so everybody has a thing. And what I have found with athletes is that if they're coming to me, that means they want to get better and they value coaching because they had a hitting coach, they had a strength and conditioning coach, they had a mental skills coach, they had this coach, they had that coach. So that's what I love about the athletes. They say, oh, well, I know I need to get better. I'm not good here, so I'm going to go to this coach, which I love. And then they're super competitive, so they want to be great. Don't be nice to me, Katy. Don't be nice to me, right? So that's the one thing. I don't look for athletes because I think, kind of like, too, where if I know that I can help them with their presentation skills and nobody else thinks that they need it to be, it's not valuable, then it's not worth our time. You want to work with the ones, and I'm sure you know this about leadership development, who want to be better. So then the executives, it's a lot of questions. Why about this? Why do you think you're having a hard time here? So I had a couple clients recently that were long time in their business, successful, and they both were fine with everything, as they always say, but starting things off was always hard, specific. And I thought it was interesting, whether it's meetings or presentations. I want to be better starting off. And I said, okay, well, it's very natural to be nervous out of the gate, right? Yeah, but I want to get rid of that. So then we go through, okay, so why do you think what are you worried about there? And then, okay, now let's try this. I want to try this and I want to try this. And then the way I coach, I want to see it on video, or if they do a talk or a presentation, I want to see the recordings. Or they'll say to me, one of them was they were on the board for a big national medical board. And he would say, okay, I did this and I know it got better. And then I did it again and I know it got better. So part of it, Billy, is it's one thing for me to see their improvement. It's a better thing for them to do the work and feel better and more confident, even if it's, just a little bit. So it really depends. I don't even know that I answered your question, but it really depends on the person.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting. Do you ever break down tape real time with an athlete? They want to watch the performance. You go telestrator and say, no, don't do this.
Well, I haven't done it with sports, obviously, but this is what I do. I mean, I had a manager recently. I loved him. He was great. And I tried to get him, the power of the pause, the power of the pause, the power of the pause. Just listen to me. Just listen to me. Listen to me on this. It's not going to be as long as you think. Just pause. Here's why we go through this thing. So he says to me, I said, I saw your video. I saw the pause. And he said, you were right. He said, I thought it felt like a half hour. And then when I looked at the video, it was like a few seconds.
Yeah.
So, but I have never obviously broke down tape with athletes, but I've broken down their talks on video. And
that's what I mean. I'm not talking about their athletics, with their on camera stuff. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. What did you do? And it's very specific. And I do this to all my clients. Okay. What did you think of this? Tell me what you were thinking here. Okay. Here's where you could have been better. And so tell me what you were thinking. How can we get this better next time? Or even more important, Billy, look at how authentic and calm you were during this answer. How can we get you to be like that all the time? That's the person that we want.
Yeah.
So 99% of the time with my clients, they practice on video and I give them feedback and we look at recordings, and that's the gold.
Well, there's two things that stood out. Was one, you talked about athletes being competitive, athletes wanting coaching and feedback. I actually just wrote something about this and why came to this realization that I am an athlete, right? And my current state of my body may tell you otherwise. But when I say that, I mean that, it is embedded in my blood. It's who I am as a person, irrespective of what I can do physically anymore. And that some people may think that's sort of cliche, but I've realized how powerful that is. And you just hit it on the head, right? I mean, I've gone through some peer review exercises and sort of candid critical feedback type thing internally with people that I've worked with, and everybody's on board before. It was like, hey, you're gonna tell me what I'm good at, and you're gonna tell me what I'm bad at, and what I need to do to change that. Yeah, sounds good. And I'm gonna do the same for you. Perfect. And then you see it when they hear the feedback, and it's just they can't process that,
Yeah.
And the one thing I always tried to embrace with athletes is these guys are not stupid. Don't think they're dumb because they're athletes. That doesn't mean they're dumb jocks. They know if they're not playing well. They know if they are playing well. So if you're going to tell them something that contradicts what they know to be true, they're going to know you're lying to them. They are self-aware physically, usually at a very high level. Maybe not always mentally and emotionally. Can be a blind spot for some, but the physical honing their craft, they know when they're cooking, and they know when they're not. And so that the power of being able to tap into that from a coach perspective is awesome, because it's just like, okay, here you go. You're not very good here, right? Yep, I know. How do I get better? And that's another example of what I was talking about earlier, where not everybody has that. I think everybody probably wants to get better, but not everybody is willing to do what it's going to take. And the first step in that is hearing the feedback, the real truth.
Yeah, and that's the real truth, because they can see it when, if we're watching it and I can call attention to it and they can tell me this is what I was thinking, then we can get through it. And that is the worst part for everybody, is watching themselves on video.
Yeah.
It's the worst part for everybody. And I know this and I understand it. And it is where they will get better. So the goal is for them to be able to watch themselves on video and not cringe. And I tell them that took me a long time to be able to watch myself on TV and not want to throw up. We're hard on ourselves.
Yeah.
So, but that's where the gold is. I will say the athletes are competitive. And I will say that, so Andre Reed, I used to do some stuff with Andre Reed in San Diego on my sports show. He'd come in and break down playoffs and stuff. And he was a wide receiver for the Buffalo Bills, Hall of Fame guy. And great charisma, all of it, and loved his community. And he just said, Katy, athletes are some of the most insecure people that you'll ever meet. I just want you to know that as well. And I appreciated that, and I never forgot it. And so you can look at things through both lenses, and that's where the empathy comes in, because you think of it like, to your point, yes, they want to win and they can take it because they're tough. And I will always remember what Andre Reed said. Now, that doesn't mean everybody is. It doesn't mean anything. There's no blank. That was not a blanket statement. I didn't take it as a blanket statement, but I've kept that in mind as I'm paying attention and listening to what they're thinking and what they're saying about why they did this or why they did that.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable. It's you've done so much in one area, and you've become an expert in one area, and you've honed this craft over decades. And now you have to leave that tactical skill and go do something else.
Yeah.
You still leverage all of sort of the process and the softer skills that helped you get to that point tactically. But yeah, it's like, there's a lot. What do I do, with the rest of my life? And you see guys that are going through turmoil at home and real stuff. Like, these are human beings with families and loss and all this stuff that's going on in their life. And typically the field or the court or the eye, that's sort of their refuge. They can kind of check their personal lives for a couple hours and just go be them. And it can be really therapeutic and freeing in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And I don't see the ones that are really suffering just because I'm seeing the ones that need work for their next gig, whatever that is, whether it's
but it speaks to the insecurities, right? I mean, they're insecure outside of their arena.
Yeah.
because that's what they know as well as anything. But
Yeah.
everything else, I haven't spent as much time doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So you talked about the power of silence, right? That one always fascinates me because I have felt myself rush through presentations before, and I know I'm going too fast, but I can't stop myself at this point because it does. That pause feels like it is eternity. And then the other thing I've always thought is I got a buddy who's a couple actually who are comedians, and I'm like, you can stand up comedy can be the best thing in the world to sit through with somebody that's good at it, and it is arguably the most painful thing in the world when somebody's not good at it, because I'm going to get up there with a microphone for 10 minutes and I'm going to entertain you. You have no idea what I'm going to talk about. Like that, has got to be horrifying for so many different people. But the folks that have it, talk about comedic timing, right? So much of it is just when you deliver the punchline or how you position your body when you're about to say the punch, whatever it may be. And it's all tied into how everybody else is receiving what you're giving, Tell me a little bit more about that specifically, right? The power of the pause and from a recipient standpoint, what your read is on how that impacts them.
I love the comedian parallel because I have recommended my clients for this reason to go watch comedians because of their timing and their ability to pause and just stare you down. And I've also used comedians in my presentations because, like you, I think it's got to be the most difficult thing to do. And being able to stand there and be composed and hold that pause, it has to be tough. And so one of the quotes that Amy Poehler said was, I think it's glorious to be nervous. Hooray for being nervous. It means you care. And I think for me, and you know this about even athletes, I mean, there were guys vomiting before games and at halftime because they were nervous. And that's one thing. And then when I hear Amy Poehler say it, it resonates because of the difficulty of the comedic timing and that it's immediate judgment, immediate judgment, which is what we're all fearful of. So the power of the pause is powerful. That's exactly what it is this is your tool. Nobody likes silence. I will tell you, and I did a video on this last month. I had a COO, so smart, and says to me like this, "Oh, silence is so awkward." And I laughed because everybody hates it. Most everybody is hates silence. So here's the thing about silence. People are worried. They're either worried, they're uncomfortable with silence. They're uncomfortable that that they may say something stupid, or for whatever reason. There's a variety of reasons where people are uncomfortable with pausing. Okay. So let me tell you why creating this in your practice will be a deal breaker for you. Number one, if you can pause, that will give you time to process what you just said, and it will give the audience time to process what you just said. So if you pause, the audience has a second to process what you just said. Number two, if you pause, there's an anticipation about what's going to happen next. And these are all natural things for the brain. So if you think about it, maybe you're in a Zoom that's really boring, or maybe think about when you were in fourth grade and you were in your classroom and you were kind of not paying attention and the teacher pauses. What does everybody do? They double down on the listening, right? Whether they were engaged or not. So that is powerful to keep people engaged. And then give yourself a break. If you pause, you can take a beat, shoulders back, take a beat and try to gather yourself if you get nervous or you forget what you're trying to say. That's the power of it. And when you pause, and this is the one I learned doing high stakes interviews, is when you pause, the other person sometimes feels the need to fill the space or say something they weren't sure that they wanted to say before. And that's where the gold is.
Right. Yeah, it's a fair point. It's a negotiation, right? The first one that talks loses.
And I don't want to, right. It's not, we don't want to go down it's not a manipulative road.
No, I know. But it's the same principle, right? It's the same principle of people tend to it's gonna be it's gonna come off worse than I intend it to be. But give up more than they want because they're so afraid of the silence. They want to fill that silence so badly that they're willing to your point, like give up the soundbite that otherwise they may not have given.
Right. And so on the opposite of that, so for your viewers, as the danger, the risk there is that when you are talking it so much, you don't come across as confident. You come across as maybe because when people are filling, as you know, there's filler words like, or you know what I mean, or do you remember when that happened, or you know what I'm saying, you know what I'm saying. Whatever, we all have these crutch phrases, and if we continue to do that to fill the silence, we come across as not confident, unsure of what we're trying to say, versus being able to say what we want to say and then be uncomfortable in that silence. So I tell my clients, be uncomfortable in that silence, take a beat, and then move on. And if you do that a little bit each day, you will notice a difference. And you are going to come across as more confident as well. Perception is reality. I mean, if you think about it, you talk about comedians and you're watching people that are pausing and they're comfortable in all that uncomfortable pause, you're going to see them as a confident figure.
Right. Yeah. It's not necessarily an awkward silence. It's just a silence.
It doesn't have to be awkward.
Right. You
You're
make
right,
it awkward.
100%.
Don't make it weird.
Don't
You
make it
made it
awkward.
awkward.
Or Billy, you have to have some empathy here. Or when they're just starting out, own that it's awkward and you're going to get through it anyway.
Yeah. That's way harder, right? That's way harder knowing that it's painful and you're like, I'm just going to grit my teeth for 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi.
Yeah, but if you
get better at that, right?
Yeah. I mean, some people have to change their golf swing to get better. Some people have to, change their whatever, their batting, the way they're addressing the ball or whatever that is too.
Well, so that's actually my next question for you was so much of this ties back to sports, and it's, if you're dealing with some issues in your personal life, you go see a therapist, right? Yeah. If you want to get in great shape, you probably go hire a personal trainer. Right? If your marriage is on the rocks, you go see a counselor. There's all these sort of guides that we have to help us through all these sort of phases in life because nobody's an expert in everything. Right. So you're obviously filling a void for people that what I love about it is you're enabling folks, who are really good people, really intelligent, really genuine. You're allowing that to come out and shine sort of irrespective of circumstance or environment. And so then you're sort of magnifying all the good that person has to offer. But so much of this is, what if you had to give me a percentage, how much is psychological and how much is, tactical and sort of best tips and practices? Because you've talked a lot about fears and motivators and experiences. There's a lot of psychology that goes into that to get someone to be comfortable, whether or let me rephrase, to get someone to appear comfortable, because they may be dying on the inside, but if they can control, they come across as comfortable and confident and all the things we've talked about. So what percentage of that do you feel like is psychology for you? You've got to play a little bit of a shrink. It's
a great question. I'd say 95%, because even when I'd say 95%, and I don't even know what that 5% would be, except for, I guess the 5%, Billy, would be people who will say to me, so when I'm doing my exploratory call and I'll ask them about challenges and why this and what about that and what about this and what about that. And every once in a while, I'll get to someone and say, okay, so what I'm hearing is that things are great and you are smart enough to know that you want a tune-up. And they'll say yes. So I would say that. And just the fact that maybe they've been, like we talked about before, whether they've been going, and nobody's told them that this kind of stuff, that you can actually be better at that. You don't know what you don't know. So I would say, first of all, excellent point, mostly psychological. And then a little bit is, I just want to tune up, because you can even say like the athletes are psychological because they don't want to be judged. They know they're going to be judged and they don't want to be embarrassed. They want to be great at it. So that's what I would say. But most of it is, I mean, even people that, if we get to the emotional part and then you want to get to the emotional part and then okay, cool. Thank you, because I've felt that too. And here's what we do. And then when they have tools, then they practice it, and then you just keep going little by little. But it's psychological because people are being judged. People are being judged when they're speaking, and there are brilliant people out there that are experienced, and their messages are not landing. They're not making an impact, and that's why I can help them do.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, some of the best hitting coaches ever were psychologists. They were so much of that is freeing
Yeah.
up the mind to do what the body's been built to do at that point for
Yeah.
those guys. I've got an 8-year-old son, and we'll go play in our front driveway or whatever, and he's swinging and he's having a blast. He's swinging hard and he's having fun. And then he gets into a game and he is as tense as can be, and he's stiff, and he's afraid of making a mistake. And so I'm trying to work through that with him right now. It's like, make a mistake. It's okay. You'll be okay. You'll get another at bat, right? We'll play another game. And it's kind of reminded me about all this stuff that people they get in their own heads,
Yeah.
and it's so just damning and damaging to your potential and what you can do. And we have a tendency, I think, to view everything as sort of a skill,
Yeah.
that I can hone or develop. And really a lot of it's like a mental framework, for you to be able to go do other things. It gets back to my point about athletes, right? You know how to compete. You're not afraid of failure. You know how to work hard. You know that you aren't perfect and the other person's talented too, right? So all these things, just take it and now go put it into medical device sales instead of
Yeah.
basketball, right? Whatever it is. But just the people that I would imagine seek out your help, right, are in a place where they've either, well, if they're seeking you out, they've identified they've got a blind spot, they need help.
Hmm.
And whether
Hmm.
that is a fatal flaw and they're bleeding, or they know it's a ceiling that they've imposed on themselves and they can't take that next step because they see all the people that are where they want to be and they have the skills that they don't. Just that, like, self-awareness and want to is, I would imagine, enough to get them pretty close to where they want to be.
Yeah. 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 Agreed. The brain, it's all in the mind. It's the mind. What did they say? What's the famous golfer that said it's the 6 inches between your ears? I
Yeah,
don't know.
100%. Yep. Yeah. The hardest. Yeah. I
Well,
know what
and
you're talking about.
your poor kid, he's playing baseball. I mean, the percentage of success is 30
That's why I
or
told him he's got a
30.
Hank Aaron jersey in his room. I pulled up Hank Aaron's career statistics. I'm like, you know how many outs this guy made? Right? I mean, you know
Good,
how many times he struck out? Like all these
good,
things that's why I love
good.
baseball, because it's a game of failure and you have to learn how to come back from that. But you see that in kids. Kids aren't, I'm not talking about afraid of the boogeyman or afraid of the dark, but like generally speaking, kids aren't afraid of much,
Right.
and when you see it, it's like this visceral thing and you're like, what happened? It's like something just possessed your body. And it's
Yeah.
exactly what you see when someone who's very at ease in a group of 10 and he's the life of the party gets up on a stage and all of a sudden he's a mannequin. He didn't know what to do. Like it's just your brain takes over and you short wire.
Can I ask you a baseball question?
Maybe.
What was the biggest lesson that you took away when you were the AGM in the Diamondbacks? What was the biggest lesson you took away from Kevin Towers, who I loved very much?
Yeah, that's a great question. KT's
He
come up
was the general
on.
manager when I covered. He was the general manager, and Bruce Bochy was the manager when I started covering the Padres. And there's nothing like those two.
I cannot imagine. I mean, I was not fortunate enough to work with Boch, but I saw the two of them interact enough. But I was fortunate enough to work for KT, and not just him, but other. I mean, Alan Trammell I talked about earlier, Don Baylor,
Yeah.
passed away a few years ago.
Yeah.
Matt Williams, Kirk Gibson, Bob Gephardt. I mean, a million people that have done some just remarkable things in the game. But KT was special, and I would say that the thing that I stole from him, and I would
Mhm.
consider it a strength of mine now, is his ability. He was way better at it than I am, but his ability to just walk into a room
Mhm.
and you could blindfold him,
Mhm.
and he was going to be the same guy. He was going to talk to that person the same way. He could be walking in and he'd pull off the blindfold and he could be in an owner's meeting with the controlling owner of the team and the commissioner of baseball, or he could pull it off and it could be the clubhouse guys that are watching the jockstraps. And he was going to be the same guy, and he was going to crack the same jokes, and he was going to talk about the same little hole in the wall dive bar in Fresno that he went to one time, and he remembers the bartender's name. And it was just dripping authenticity, right? It wasn't this like salesy, like contrived thing. He just had that gift, and he made players at ease. He made coaches at ease. He empowered people to go do things that they otherwise may not have been able to do, myself included, by doing that. And that always just resonated. I was so excited. That was my first like quote unquote big time job in baseball. And I got to go do it for Kevin Towers, the guy that been a GM for 15 years, and had been a player and a coach. He had all these sort of, these qualifications, so to speak, but it was just sort of just his authenticity as person. It was just unmistakably, unabashedly KT. And I think I would argue probably anyone who's ever met him would have something similar to say about him.
Well said. Perfectly said.
Yeah. So that was a fun time. We had some good jokes, and I miss him, as well as some other folks there, but, Katy, this was awesome. I really appreciate you sharing this. I think this is going to be really valuable for people that, in all walks of life, honestly. I mean, people that are trying to get into the media profession can learn a lot from your journey. And then all of us who are trying to, I would say, come across as our authentic selves, can learn from what you're talking about and your coaching. And so, tell us where everybody can find you if they're so inclined.
Yeah, so it's Katy with a Y, and I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, and I have a YouTube channel. Katy Temple MediaCoaching.com is my website. So all that information is out there. I've got a Google business page. If you don't find me, then there's a problem. There is a problem. But right, I'd love to hear from anybody. Yeah,
go find her. She can help. So I appreciate it, Katy. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
and I look forward to talking again soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the No One Is Watching podcast. If you'd like to support the show, hit the subscribe button, leave a review, and share it with your friends. If you're interested in similar content focused on leadership, culture, and high performance, check out nooneiswatching.com. Your time is valuable, so I appreciate you spending some of it with me today. See you next time.